I trusted my daughter with everything: my medical decisions, my financial safety, my deepest secrets. I gave her power of attorney out of love and necessity. But when that phone call came from the bank about a $47,000 loan I never applied for, I realized my greatest mistake wasn't trusting too little, it was trusting too much. The woman I'd raised, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, had just destroyed my entire financial future. And when I confronted her about it, when I was shaking and crying and demanding answers, she looked me dead in the eye and said two words that shattered my heart: "Calm down." This is the story of how my own daughter stole my retirement, my security, and nearly my sanity. This is the story of how I fought back against the person I loved most in the world. And this is why I'm telling you now, because if it happened to me, it could happen to anyone. You know that feeling when your whole world crumbles in a single phone call? When everything you thought you knew about your life, your family, your future, turns out to be built on lies? That's where my story begins. At 63 years old, I thought I had everything figured out. I had my little house, my careful budget, my retirement savings, and most importantly, I had my family. My daughter Catherine called me every Sunday, brought the grandkids over for dinner, asked for my advice about everything. I was living the dream of every mother: staying close to my children, being needed, being loved. But dreams can become nightmares faster than you think. Trust can be weaponized. Love can be exploited. And sometimes the person who destroys your life is the same person you die to protect. Sometimes your biggest threat doesn't come from strangers or criminals or con artists. Sometimes it comes from the person who used to crawl into your bed during thunderstorms, who called you their hero, who promised to take care of you when you got old. This is my story, but it could be yours. This is my warning, but it could be your wake-up call. Because financial abuse by family members is happening every day, to people just like me, people just like you. And most of us never see it coming until it's too late. I thought I knew what a normal Tuesday morning looked like. Coffee brewing at exactly 7:15, my favorite ceramic mug waiting on the counter, the one with the little chip on the handle that I'd refused to throw away for 15 years. The morning light streaming through my kitchen window, hitting the small potted herbs on the windowsill just right. You know that feeling when life feels predictable, safe, like you've got everything figured out? That was me. At 63, I'd finally reached that sweet spot where my days had a rhythm, where surprises were limited to finding a good sale at the grocery store or maybe a phone call from an old friend. I was stirring honey into my coffee when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but it had that official look to it. You know the kind, all businesslike with too many digits. I almost let it go to voicemail. God, I wish I had. But something made me answer. Maybe just the habit of a lifetime of being responsible, of always picking up the phone when it rings. Mrs. Johnson? The voice was crisp, professional, the kind that cuts through your morning calm like a knife. This is Patricia from First National Bank's fraud department. We need to discuss some unusual activity on your account. My hand tightened around the phone. I'm sorry, what kind of activity? My voice came out smaller than I intended, like I was already shrinking from whatever was coming. Ma'am, we're showing a personal loan application processed yesterday for $47,000. The funds have already been disbursed to an account under your name. We're calling to verify this transaction. You know that feeling when the floor just disappears beneath your feet? When your brain tries to process words that don't make sense, like someone speaking a foreign language? I set my coffee down so hard it sloshed onto the counter, but I barely noticed. $47,000? Yesterday? I hadn't left my house yesterday except to get the mail. There has to be some mistake, I heard myself saying, my voice getting higher, more desperate. I didn't apply for any loan. I don't need a loan. I've never needed a loan. The silence on the other end stretched too long. Mrs. Johnson, I'm going to need you to come into the branch today. Can you bring identification and any documentation you might have regarding this loan? Documentation I didn't have for a loan I didn't take. My hand started shaking, and I realized I was still holding the phone pressed so hard against my ear it was starting to hurt. I'll be there in an hour, I managed to say before hanging up. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the spilled coffee spreading across the counter. Watching it drip onto the floor I'd mopped just yesterday. Everything looked the same, my morning routine interrupted, frozen in time, but nothing felt the same. The safety I'd built around myself, the predictable life I'd worked so hard to create, suddenly felt like tissue paper. You know that feeling when your mind starts racing but can't seem to land on any one thought? I found myself checking my purse, my wallet, my identification. Like maybe I'd find some clue about what was happening. I called my bank, my real bank where I'd done business for 25 years, and asked them to check my accounts. Everything was normal there. But this other bank, this First National, had my social security number, my address, my date of birth. They had everything they needed to prove I was me. The drive to the bank felt like moving through a dream, or maybe a nightmare. I kept thinking this would all get cleared up, that there was some computer error, some mix-up with names or numbers. These things happen, right? Identity theft. We hear about it on the news all the time. Some stranger in another state using my information. That had to be it. But sitting in that sterile office, watching the bank officer pull up documents on her computer screen, I saw my signature, my actual signature, the one I'd been writing for decades, the one with the funny little loop on the J that I'd developed in high school. It was right there on loan documents I'd never seen before, for money I'd never requested. Ma'am, the officer said gently, this application was submitted online, but the IP address shows it came from a computer in your city, and the account where the funds were deposited. She paused, looking uncomfortable. It's a joint account. Your name is on it, along with someone named Katherine Johnson. Katherine, my daughter's name. My chest tightened as if someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart. No, no, this couldn't be what I was thinking. There had to be another explanation. There had to be. But as I sat there, staring at that computer screen, at my own signature on documents I'd never signed, I knew my normal Tuesday morning was the last normal morning I'd have for a very long time. You know that feeling when your whole world tilts sideways? I had no idea this was just the beginning. I drove home from the bank in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. The bank officer had given me copies of everything: loan documents, account information, transaction records. The papers sat on my passenger seat like evidence of a crime I couldn't comprehend. Catherine's name was on everything, right next to mine, like we were partners in this deception. But I wasn't a partner. I was a victim, wasn't I? The drive felt endless, my mind spinning through possibilities, trying to find any explanation that didn't lead to the one conclusion I couldn't bear to face. Maybe someone had stolen Catherine's identity, too. Maybe this was all part of some elaborate scheme targeting families. Maybe my daughter was just as much a victim as I was. I clung to these thoughts like lifelines, desperate to avoid the truth that was crystallizing in my chest like ice. You know that feeling when you're about to make a phone call that could change everything? When your finger hovers over the contact and you know that once you press it, there's no going back. I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, staring at Catherine's name on my phone. My daughter, my baby girl who used to curl up in my lap and tell me all her secrets. The woman who called me every Sunday like clockwork, who brought her kids over for dinner every month, who still asked for my advice about everything from recipes to relationships. Finally, I pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Maybe she wouldn't answer. Maybe I'd get voicemail and could figure out what to say, how to approach this delicate situation. But then I heard her voice, bright and cheerful, the same voice that used to greet me from the school bus every afternoon. Hey, Mom, how's your day going? So normal, so casual, like she hadn't just stolen nearly $50,000 from me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. How do you ask your own daughter if she's committed fraud using your name? How do you even begin that conversation? Mom, are you there? Catherine? I finally managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. There was a pause, just a tiny hesitation, but I caught it. A mother always knows when her child is hiding something. It's an instinct that never goes away, no matter how old they get. Sure, Mom. What's up? I got a call from First National Bank today about a loan for $47,000. I waited, holding my breath, praying she'd sound confused, surprised, angry on my behalf, praying she'd say this was the first she'd heard of it. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. 1 second, 2 seconds, three. In that silence, I heard my answer. In that silence, my heart broke. Oh, she said finally. Just oh. Not surprise, not confusion, not the righteous indignation I'd been hoping for. Just a small, guilty oh that confirmed my worst fears. Catherine, my voice was barely a whisper. Please tell me you didn't do this. Mom, I can explain. The words came out in a rush, and I could hear her getting defensive already. It's not what you think. I was going to tell you. I just needed a little time to get things sorted out. You know that feeling when someone you love lies to your face? When they look you in the eye, or in this case, speak to you on the phone, and try to convince you that black is white, that wrong is right? It's a special kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than any stranger's deception ever could. You forged my signature, I said, my voice getting stronger as the reality sank in. You took out a loan in my name without my knowledge or consent. You stole from me, Catherine. I didn't steal anything. Her voice was getting louder now, more agitated. Mom, you don't understand the situation I'm in. David lost his job. We're behind on the mortgage. The kids need school supplies and clothes. I was desperate. I knew you'd help if you could, but you're always so careful with money, and I needed the help now. The excuses kept coming, each one hitting me like a physical blow. She was turning this around, making it about my shortcomings as a mother, my supposed unwillingness to help my own family. But that wasn't true. I'd helped them before, paid for groceries when times were tight, covered car repairs, even helped with their down payment on their house. I'd never said no when they really needed help. So you decided to help yourself to my credit? I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You decided to commit fraud using my name? God, Mom, calm down. Those 4 words. Calm down, Mom. Said in that tone I remembered from her teenage years, that dismissive eye-rolling tone that suggested I was being dramatic, unreasonable, hysterical, like I was the one in the wrong here, like I was overreacting to having my financial security threatened by my own daughter. Calm down, I repeated, incredulous. Catherine, you've put my credit at risk. You've taken out a loan I'll have to pay back. You've committed a crime using my identity, and you want me to calm down? It's not a crime when it's family, she said, and I could practically see her waving her hand dismissively. Look, I'll pay it back. I just need some time. The loan payments aren't even that much, and with David looking for work, we'll get back on our feet soon. Have you ever had your own child dismiss your pain, minimize your concerns, treat you like you're being unreasonable for being upset about being victimized? It's a special kind of heartbreak that goes beyond disappointment or anger. It's the moment you realize that the person you raised, the person you sacrificed for, the person you love more than life itself, sees you as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. Catherine, I didn't agree to this loan. I didn't sign those papers. You forged my signature. I didn't forge anything, she said, her voice getting sharper. You gave me power of attorney when you had that surgery last year, remember? Technically, I can sign things for you. That stopped me cold. The power of attorney. I'd given it to her when I'd had my gallbladder removed, just as a precaution, just in case something went wrong during the surgery. It was supposed to be temporary, just for medical decisions, but I'd never formally revoked it. That was for medical emergencies, Catherine, not for you to take out loans. Look, Mom, what's done is done. I'm handling it. You don't need to worry about anything. You know that feeling when you realize you don't know someone at all? When the person you thought you knew, the person you trusted completely, reveals themselves to be a stranger? I was looking at $47,000 in debt I'd never agreed to, talking to a daughter who saw nothing wrong with what she'd done, and I understood that this conversation was far from over. But what she told me next made me question everything I thought I knew about my own child. The phone went dead in my hand. Catherine had hung up on me, her own mother, after telling me I was making a big deal out of nothing and that she'd handle it herself. I sat there in my kitchen, staring at the phone, feeling like I just had a conversation with a complete stranger. This wasn't the daughter I'd raised. This wasn't the woman who used to bring me flowers on Mother's Day and tear up during sentimental commercials. This was someone cold, calculating, someone who could look at stealing from her own mother and call it handling things. That night, I didn't sleep, not a single minute. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through numbers, scenarios, consequences. $47,000. In my name, with my credit on the line. I'd worked my entire life to build good credit, to be financially responsible, to have something to leave my children when I was gone. And now my own daughter had put all of that at risk. You know that feeling when you're lying in the dark and every worst case scenario plays out in your mind like a horror movie? I kept thinking about my retirement savings, my modest pension, my carefully planned budget. I'd done everything right, saved every penny I could, lived below my means, prepared for my golden years. And in one day, one phone call, one betrayal, all of that security felt like it was crumbling around me. By morning, I was a wreck. My eyes were red and swollen, my hands shaking as I tried to make coffee. The simple routine that had started this nightmare felt impossible now. Everything reminded me of what I'd lost. Not just the money, but the trust, the relationship with my daughter, the peace of mind I'd taken for granted. I started making phone calls, first to my bank, then to credit agencies, then to lawyers. Each conversation was more devastating than the last. The bank told me that since Catherine had power of attorney, the loan might be considered legitimate. The credit agency said the debt was showing up on my credit report. The lawyers wanted retainer fees I wasn't sure I could afford, especially with this new debt hanging over my head. Mrs. Johnson, one lawyer explained patiently, proving financial abuse between family members is complicated. Your daughter had legal authority to act on your behalf. The question is whether she exceeded that authority. Legal authority. Those words kept echoing in my head. My daughter had legal authority to ruin my life, and I'd given it to her. Out of love, out of trust, out of the natural instinct to protect your children, even when you're the one who needs protection. The sleepless nights multiplied. One became two, then three, then a week of lying awake, calculating and recalculating. The loan payments were due monthly, $847 for the next 7 years. 7 years of payments I'd never agreed to make. 7 years of my fixed income being stretched even thinner than it already was. I started canceling things, the small luxuries I'd allowed myself, the premium cable package, the weekly dinner out with friends, the monthly book club dues. Every dollar had to be accounted for now. Every expense had to be justified. I was living like a prisoner in my own life, and the warden was my own daughter. Have you ever felt financially helpless, like you're drowning and every lifeline has been cut? I'd always been independent, always managed my own affairs, always prided myself on being responsible. Now I was looking at debt I hadn't incurred, payments I couldn't afford, and a future that looked darker with each passing day. Then I found the other accounts. While going through my credit report with a fine-tooth comb, I discovered that Catherine had been busy. A credit card in my name with a $3,000 balance. A store credit account with one $500 charged to it. A line of credit for $10,000 that had been nearly maxed out. The total damage wasn't just $47,000. It was closer to $62,000. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the papers. Each new discovery felt like another betrayal, another knife in my back. How long had this been going on? How many times had my daughter looked me in the eye and lied to me? How many family dinners had we shared while she was systematically destroying my financial security? I called her again. This time, she didn't answer. I left a message, trying to keep my voice steady. Catherine, I found the other accounts. We need to talk. This is more serious than I thought. She didn't call back. Not that day, not the next day, not the day after that. My own daughter was ghosting me, avoiding me like I was the criminal in this situation. You know that feeling when you're the villain in your own story? When everyone acts like you're the one causing problems by being upset about being victimized? That's when my family started taking sides. My sister called me after talking to Catherine. She's really struggling, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Maybe you could work something out with her. She's got those kids to think about. My son, Catherine's older brother, was more direct. Mom, she made a mistake, but she's family. Can't you just help her out? You've got savings. Suddenly, I was the unreasonable one. I was the one breaking up the family by being upset about fraud. I was the one causing drama by wanting my daughter to be held accountable for her actions. The victim was being blamed for making the perpetrator face consequences. The isolation was suffocating. Family gatherings became awkward affairs where conversations stopped when I entered the room. My grandchildren, Catherine's kids, were being kept away from me. I wasn't invited to birthday parties or school events. I was being punished for being the victim of a crime. You know that feeling when you're completely alone in a room full of people? When your own family looks at you like you're the problem? I started questioning everything. Was I being too harsh? Was I overreacting? Should I just accept the debt and move on for the sake of family harmony? The guilt was eating me alive. I'd lie awake at night wondering if I'd been a bad mother, if I'd failed somewhere along the way. Had I been too strict? Too lenient? Had I somehow created this situation by not being available enough, not helping enough, not being the mother Catherine needed? My health started deteriorating. I lost weight because I couldn't eat. Food tasted like cardboard, and my stomach was constantly in knots. I developed insomnia so severe that I'd get maybe 2 hours of sleep a night. My doctor prescribed sleeping pills, but they didn't help. How do you sleep when your own child has betrayed you so completely? The depression was the worst part. Have you ever felt like you failed at the most important job of your life? Like everything you thought you knew about yourself, about your family, about your relationships, was built on lies? I stopped answering the phone. I stopped going out. I stopped doing the things that used to bring me joy. I'd sit in my living room, staring at family photos, wondering where I'd gone wrong. There was Catherine at 5, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a Mother's Day card she'd made at school. There she was at graduation, beautiful and proud, hugging me tight and thanking me for everything I'd done for her. There she was at her wedding, tears in her eyes as she told me I was the best mother she could have asked for. Which version was real? The loving daughter in the photos, or the cold stranger who'd hung up on me? The woman who used to call me her hero, or the one who'd stolen my financial security without a second thought? Christmas was approaching, and I knew I wouldn't be invited to family celebrations. I'd be spending the holidays alone, broke, and heartbroken. My daughter had taken more than money from me. She'd taken my family, my security, my faith in the people I loved most. But sitting there in that empty house, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, something shifted inside me. The depression started mixing with anger. The guilt began transforming into determination. You know that feeling when you finally realize you've been pushed far enough? When you stop being the victim and start being the fighter? That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I picked up the phone and called the lawyer back. It was time to stop being the victim and start being the plaintiff. It was time to take my own daughter to court. Her reaction was worse than I imagined. The morning I called the lawyer back, I woke up different. I can't explain it exactly. Maybe it was the exhaustion of carrying this burden alone for months. Or maybe it was the realization that no one else was going to save me from this nightmare. But something had crystallized overnight, like a bone that finally sets after being broken. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. Mr. Peterson, I said when he answered, my voice steadier than it had been in weeks. This is Helen Johnson. I want to proceed with the case against my daughter. There was a pause. Even lawyers, I think, find it hard to comprehend a mother taking legal action against her own child. Mrs. Johnson, are you absolutely certain about this? Once we file, there's no going back. This will be public record. Your family relationships, My family relationships are already destroyed, I interrupted. My daughter stole from me, and my family is treating me like I'm the criminal. I'm done protecting people who won't protect me. You know that feeling when you finally stand up for yourself after years of being pushed around? When you stop making excuses for people who hurt you? It's terrifying and liberating at the same time. My hands were shaking as I signed the papers, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my own life. The hardest part was making the phone call to Catherine, not to ask for her permission, not to warn her, but to tell her what I was doing. I owed her that much, not as her victim, but as her mother. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, her voice cautious. Mom? Catherine, I need you to know that I'm filing a lawsuit against you for fraud and financial abuse. My lawyer will be serving you papers within the next few days. The silence was deafening. Then, you're what? I'm taking you to court. You stole from me. You've destroyed my credit, and you've shown no remorse. I'm done waiting for you to do the right thing. Mom, you can't be serious. Her voice was incredulous, like I'd just told her I was planning to fly to the moon. You're going to sue your own daughter? Over money? Over $62,000 that you stole from me, yes. Over the fact that you've put my retirement in jeopardy. Over the fact that you've lied to me repeatedly and shown no intention of making this right. I told you I'd pay it back, she shouted. I just need time. You've had months, Catherine. You've had months to come clean, to make payments, to show me you're taking this seriously. Instead, you've avoided me, lied to the family about what really happened, and made me the villain in this situation. Have you ever had to be the strong one when everyone expects you to be weak? When your own family thinks you should just accept being victimized because it's easier than dealing with the truth? I could hear Catherine starting to cry, and every maternal instinct in my body wanted to comfort her, to say it would be okay, to back down and let her walk all over me again. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not anymore. You're really going to do this? She asked, her voice small and broken. You're really going to destroy our family over this? I'm not destroying anything, Catherine. You did that when you decided to steal from me. You destroyed our family when you chose to lie to me and manipulate me. I'm just refusing to pretend it didn't happen. She hung up on me again, but this time it didn't devastate me. This time I felt oddly relieved. The conversation I'd been dreading for months was over, and I'd survived it. I'd stood my ground. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Depositions, document gathering, meetings with lawyers. It felt surreal, sitting in sterile conference rooms, talking about my daughter like she was a stranger who'd victimized me, which in many ways she had become. My lawyer, Mr. Peterson, was thorough and professional. He explained the process, the likelihood of success, the potential outcomes. Mrs. Johnson, you have a strong case. The documentation is clear. The paper trail is solid. Your daughter clearly exceeded her authority under the power of attorney. You know that feeling when someone validates your reality after months of people telling you you're overreacting? It was like finally being able to breathe after holding your breath for months. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being dramatic. I was the victim of a crime, and I had every right to seek justice. The family reaction was swift and brutal. My sister called me, furious. Helen, how could you do this? She's your daughter. She made a mistake, but you're going to ruin her life over money? My son was even worse. Mom, this is vindictive. Catherine has kids to think about. If she gets convicted of fraud, she could lose her job, her house, everything. Is that really what you want? What I want, I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me, is for my daughter to be held accountable for her actions. What I want is for someone in this family to acknowledge that what she did was wrong. But they couldn't see it, or wouldn't. To them, I was the bitter old woman who was destroying the family over money. To them, Catherine was the struggling mother who'd made a desperate mistake. No one wanted to acknowledge that their beloved daughter and sister was capable of deliberately deceiving and stealing from her own mother. The court date was set for 3 months out. 3 months to prepare, to gather evidence, to steel myself for the hardest thing I'd ever have to do, testify against my own child in a court of law. As the date approached, I started having second thoughts. Not about the rightness of my cause, but about whether I was strong enough to see it through. Have you ever had to do something that felt impossible but necessary? Something that would change everything, with no possibility of going back? I thought about withdrawing the case a dozen times. I thought about calling Catherine and trying to work something out privately. But then I'd look at my bank statements, at my credit report, at the bills I could no longer afford to pay, and I'd remember why I was doing this. I wasn't just fighting for the money. I was fighting for my dignity, my right to be treated with respect, my refusal to be a victim. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I kept thinking about walking into that courtroom, seeing Catherine sitting at the defendant's table, having to tell a judge about the most painful betrayal of my life. But I also thought about all the other mothers out there who might be going through the same thing, who might be too afraid or too ashamed to stand up for themselves. You know that feeling when you're about to do something that terrifies you, but you know is right? That's how I felt walking into that courthouse. Terrified, but determined. Whatever happened next, I was done being a victim. What the judge said surprised everyone in that courtroom, including me. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, but somehow that made it feel more intimate, more personal. I sat in the front row, my hands folded in my lap, trying to project strength I wasn't sure I possessed. Catherine sat at the defendant's table with her lawyer, and for the first time in months, I could see her clearly. She looked older, tired, and when our eyes met briefly, I saw something I hadn't expected: fear. Judge Martinez was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes but a no nonsense demeanor. She'd clearly read all the documents, studied all the evidence. When she spoke, her voice was measured but firm. "This is a case that troubles me deeply," she began, looking directly at Catherine. "Financial abuse of elderly family members is one of the most underreported crimes in our society, often because victims are reluctant to prosecute their own relatives. But Mrs. Johnson, you've shown remarkable courage in pursuing this case." My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure everyone could hear it. The judge continued, "Ms. Catherine Johnson, you had power of attorney for medical decisions. You deliberately exceeded that authority to take out loans, open credit accounts, and accumulate debt totaling $62,000 in your mother's name. This was not a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was calculated fraud." Catherine's lawyer had tried to argue that it was a family matter, that Catherine had intended to pay everything back, that she was under financial duress, but the judge wasn't buying it. "Intent to repay does not excuse fraud," Judge Martinez said firmly, "and the fact that this was perpetrated against your own mother, someone who trusted you completely, makes it particularly egregious. You know that feeling when justice finally comes? When someone in authority finally sees the truth you've been trying to tell? I felt vindicated, but also heartbroken. This wasn't how I'd ever imagined my relationship with my daughter would end up. The judge ordered full restitution. Catherine would have to pay back every penny, plus interest and court costs. She was sentenced to probation and community service, but thankfully avoided jail time. The criminal conviction would stay on her record, but she wouldn't lose her children or her job. I felt relief mixed with sadness. I'd won, but winning against your own child feels like losing too. Catherine's reaction was exactly what I'd expected. As we left the courtroom, she turned to me with tears streaming down her face. "I hope you're happy, Mom. I hope this was worth destroying our family." But I wasn't happy. I was exhausted, heartbroken, and strangely empty. "Catherine," I said quietly, "I didn't destroy our family. You did that when you decided to steal from me." She walked away without another word, her lawyer guiding her toward the exit. I watched her go, wondering if I'd ever see her again, if my grandchildren would ever know their grandmother, if this legal victory was worth the personal cost. The months that followed were a mix of recovery and reflection. Slowly, Catherine began making payments. The court had ordered a payment plan that would take years to complete, but at least the money was coming back. My credit score started improving. The financial pressure that had been crushing me began to ease, but the real healing took longer. You know that feeling when you finally start over at 63? When you have to rebuild not just your finances, but your entire understanding of family, trust, and relationships. I had to learn to live with the knowledge that my daughter was capable of betraying me, while also learning to forgive myself for not seeing it coming. I started going to a support group for elder financial abuse victims. I was shocked to discover how common my experience was. Room after room of people my age, all betrayed by children, grandchildren, nephews, nieces, all of us carrying the same shame, the same self-doubt, the same heartbreak. Have you ever realized you're not alone in something you thought was uniquely terrible? Hearing other people's stories helped me understand that I wasn't a bad mother, that I hadn't failed. I'd been victimized by someone who exploited my love and trust. That's not a failure of parenting. That's a failure of character on the part of the perpetrator. I also started volunteering at a legal aid clinic, helping other seniors navigate financial abuse cases. It gave me purpose, turned my pain into something useful. I could help people who were where I'd been, scared, confused, betrayed, and unsure of their rights. My new life isn't the life I'd planned, but it's mine. I'm more careful now, more guarded, but also stronger. I've learned that setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. I've learned that protecting yourself doesn't make you a bad person, even when the person you're protecting yourself from is your own child. The hardest part is still the hope. Despite everything, I still hope that someday Catherine will truly understand what she did, will offer a genuine apology, will want to rebuild our relationship on honest terms. But I've learned not to wait for that day. I've learned to build a life that doesn't depend on other people's choices. You know that feeling when you realize you're stronger than you thought? That's where I am now, scarred but surviving, wounded but not broken, and finally free from being anyone's victim. We're all stronger than we think we are. Sometimes we just need the courage to prove it to ourselves.